Chief Munsey, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to present your testimony.
Chairman Olburn, LT, thank you for allowing me to testify. Ranking Member Fushi, thank you for you and your husband's service. And Ms. Longren, thank you. Ranking Member Longren, thank you. Lofgren, excuse me, thank you for your testimony as well. I have to ask you, Chair, did you use ChatGPT for your remarks?
No, sir, I did not.
I'm Dan Munsey. I'm the fire chief for the County of San Bernardino. We happen to be the largest county in the United States, over 20,000 square miles. For perspective, you can take the 4 small states in the Union and put it within our borders. Of interest is almost 80% of our area is state or federal land. We have a large federal responsibility and work with the various forestry agencies in our county. I do sit on the International Association of Fire Chiefs as a tech council president, have sat there for 4 years. I am on the California Metro Chiefs as a vice president that represents the largest fire departments in California. And I also sit on FireScope, in which the Emerging Information Technology Group has spent a lot of time looking at lithium-ion batteries and EVs and the hazards to firefighters. I wrote a written testimony and it focused on prevention, because our first job in the fire service is to prevent bad things from happening, and only when those things do occur, then to have a response. I'm not going to go through everything that I've written in my written testimony, but I will say that it's incredibly important that we educate the public to ensure that they understand how to safely charge their vehicles and how to not modify them. It's important that we're enforcing the rules and regulations, and there is certainly some rules and regulations that could be adopted by state, local, and federal agencies to ensure that our electric vehicles are safe. Third, we have to work with the manufacturers to ensure that we are engineering lithium-ion batteries that can withstand damage from crashes and also sustainability from fire. And I've provided some thoughts in my written testimony. I'm going to call for a video to be played here shortly. And when it's ready to be played, please bring it to the screen. But I'd like to describe this video to you. Now, this isn't a video that's going to show a large explosion or a gas that's quickly burning, but it's going to show 4 things: the effort required to suppress an emergency vehicle, the duration of the amount of time that it takes to suppress that fire, the amount of specialized equipment, and the cost. As we're fighting electric vehicle fires, as has been mentioned, there are some concerns. The first is the personal protective equipment of the firefighters. Frankly, over my career, I've seen way too many firefighters pass away and die from cancer. Our cancer rate is higher than the civilian population. Their electric vehicle lithium-ion batteries pose a challenge to firefighters' health. The personal protective equipment, especially when it's exposed by lithium-ion gases in a pressurized environment, such as the garage you see in front of you, then leads to extraordinary cleaning costs of around $500 to $1,000. This personal protective equipment must be sent off-site. There is no fire department that I have knowledge of that possesses the cleaning. Generally, it's a CO2 compressed system to remove the gases. Please play the video. Okay, so we're waiting for that to come up. Just go ahead and play it when you're ready. Equipment. You'll see in this video here shortly that they're using a fire blanket. The fire blanket is used to either suppress the fire. It's not putting the fire out, but it's controlling the fire and the gases to prevent spread. These blankets cost between $3,000 to $5,000. What you see here is a single-family residence in the Denver metro area. The firefighters had a garage. The first screen showed gases and smoke that under pressurized environment. They now have to remove the car using specialized equipment. The blanket's in the firefighter's hand. While the fire looks controlled, it is not. There's still thermal runaway of that battery, and it can ignite at any time. This blanket is used to keep that fire under check. They are now going to have to tow this vehicle to a tow yard. When they arrive at a tow yard, they're going to do things such as digging a pit, filling it with water, and immersing this vehicle, or working to isolate that battery. This car must be kept separate from humans and other cars so it doesn't ignite or cause human health. Training is also significant, of about $2,500 per firefighter, just to understand the electrical concerns, how to fight, how to use the specialized nozzles. Finally, to close the remarks, our plan in San Bernardino. We're going to need a heavy wrecker. A heavy wrecker is about $1.2 million. We're going to use these to lift the cars. We're going to have to buy a trailer with a dip tank to place the cars in a dip tank to fully extinguish these fires. I'll look forward to your questions as they come up. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Chief Munsey. I now recognize Dr. Javarian for 5 minutes to present her testimony.
Good morning, Chairman Obanalti, Ranking Member Fushi, and Ranking Member Lofgren, and members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on examining the risk and dangers of EV fires for first responders, as this is indeed a very important and timely topic. I'm the Vice President and Executive Director of UL Research Institutes, as you already mentioned. And before joining UL, I worked at NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston as a group lead for battery safety and advanced technology. Since entering the commercial market in the 1990s, lithium-ion rechargeable batteries still continue to maintain their rank for battery chemistry with the highest energy density, while also enjoying a long cycle life, low level of self-discharge, and high rate capability. The many advantages that is provided by this battery chemistry has made it the option of choice in many sectors, ranging from consumer devices to electric vehicles and stationary grid energy storage systems. Lithium-ion batteries have been used in the space sector since the late 1990s, and more recently have been deployed in the marine sector too. Associated with this high energy density, though, is the potential for lithium-ion cells to undergo catastrophic failures that can generate fire and toxic gases when they fail to be designed, manufactured, charged, or used correctly. One major challenge is the suppression of fires, as you just heard, where various difficulties arise. The first is the design and location of the battery in an EV. Lithium-ion fires need a suppressant that can efficiently cool down all the cells in the battery pack in order to prevent reignition. However, the physical location of the batteries in the EVs tends to be on the underside of the vehicle, which means a rollover of the vehicle may be required to manage access. Additionally, the batteries are typically in a well-sealed container required that is specifically to prevent water ingress in the event of a flood or if the vehicle is driven on waterlogged roads. For ease of fire suppression, designs need to be developed here in the event of a catastrophic failure. Sensors allow the opening of a relief valve in the battery pack, which could then be connected to an outlet that is accessible from a convenient location. Another area that requires research is finding methods to remediate possible toxic chemical runoff, suppressant runoff. An area of concern for first responders and firefighters working with an EV that has undergone a catastrophic failure is determining the presence and location of stranded energy. Stranded energy is energy that remains in a partially damaged battery, which can be quite significant. Based on the design of the lithium-ion batteries in EVs, it's possible after fire or other damage that some modules are fully compromised while others are not. And it's also possible to have some cells in the modules that are not compromised. So the damaged modules may include energetic cells that can also move around when you move the vehicle while it's moved to a tow yard. This can cause short circuits and possible reignition. So it's critical that to determine if parts of the battery are still energized and provide a means to discharge the cells or modules before moving the vehicles. And methods need to be developed to remotely access the data to determine the existence of locations where cells continue to be energized, and designs that bypass fully compromised modules and discharge the energized modules should also be developed. So just go on to venting and thermal runaway and the release of combustible and toxic gases. My statement has a lot of information, which I'm not going to read every part of it, but I just want to mention that toxic and corrosive gases such as HF and hydrogen cyanide are released, and we have heard from firefighters that even after washing their suits, they do find traces of HF on their suits. We also know that there are particulate emissions that are given off that are in the submicron sizes in orders of magnitude higher than the limits established for safe human exposure. The type of respirators used by first responders may also need to be reevaluated for their suitability to be worn during EV fire suppressions. And I also mentioned that the materials that are used in the suits may also need to be researched and determine if new types of materials need to be used. Other things that I wanted to talk about are mechanical impacts. Talk about fast charging. That is a concern. We would like to have more research that is done in the area of fast charging. And the last thing I also wanted to mention is cybersecurity. With the ease of updating EV vehicles and battery software remotely, it also makes it, very attractive, but there are cybersecurity concerns. And lastly, regulations need to be where one can actually recognize a vehicle, that it is an EV or any type of an EV. And also the firefighters are given enough information to work with the vehicle. Again, thank you all for the opportunity to address the House Science Committee. I look forward to addressing your questions and comments.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to both our witnesses for your testimony. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Chief Munsey, thanks again for being here. Our county is larger than most states, and that presents some unique challenges in extinguishing fires. I was struck by, in listening to your testimony, some of the vast amounts of water that's required to put out EV fires. What do you do if you're responding to a fire and you don't have a hydrant readily available? Or what do you do when an incline is so steep as it is in many places in our district, when just getting access to the EV is a challenge?
These are challenges. I'll point out that the 15 freeway, if we shut down the 15 freeway, there's several $1 million of commerce that's affected per hour. So an EV fire on the freeway, it's best to extinguish it rather than let it burn out. That would be option number one, and the preferable method, just let it burn. On the 15 freeway in our desert areas or in our mountain areas where we wouldn't have hydrants that are nearby, we really don't have a lot of options except for using a fire blanket that was demonstrated in the video to help control that fire. Two would be to bring a dip tank to the site and fill it. Other than that, there really is no other options. If we start attacking these fires using tank water, meaning the water tank on the fire engine, these are typically only 500 to 750 gallons of water. You're quickly going to run out of water and this fire is going to flare up. This could ensnarl traffic, or it could, in a bad scenario, start a wildland fire. Now we do not have any water to suppress this wildland fire.
Thank you. It's a serious problem. Dr. Javarian, I was interested in the part of your testimony where you were talking about how necessary it is to know exactly where the battery cells are and to be able to get access to them, to be able to cool them all down to prevent reignition. There's a kind of a similar problem with aircraft and with airport firefighters needing to know where the fuel is, where the emergency exits are, and that's why there are standard markings on aircraft to designate emergency exits, and most airport firefighters are provided with manuals that have a page for each type of airplane that operates at that airport commonly that shows where the flammables are, the fuel and the hydraulics and the oxygen, so that the firefighters are aware of that danger. Do you think that something like that would reduce the risk in EVs and share that knowledge about where these battery cells are located?
Sure. As you know, the cells are located, or the batteries are located on the underside, below the passenger compartment. And they pretty much are through the entire bottom of the vehicle. That also helps with the center of gravity. So one of the things that we are looking at is the SAE is writing a standard that I think it's called the J3108, which is going to be looking at putting some type of a symbol on the registration plates that would tell people what type of vehicle it is, whether it's a gasoline vehicle or electric vehicle, and it could be a pure battery electric vehicle or a PHEV or a HEV. And I think that's still not in place yet, but at some point when that comes in place, then people should be able to just look at it and then go and figure out, or translate it to something like, what I would call a QR code, but it's really just going and looking for a manual that says where it is. But I also think the bigger thing is a design that is required, where if you have an excessive, production of gas, a rupture valve or something opens up that would allow the firefighters to be able to connect to the insides of the battery, because that will also reduce the amount of water that is needed, because at this time, you're really not able to get to the cells. So you're just trying to cool the outside of the vehicle, which is why it takes a lot more water to put it out. And of course, you're not really reaching the cells, so you're not really putting out the entire problem. So I think that there needs to be a little bit more research and design and engineering that goes into this, and I think we can, get to that.
All right, thank you. Chief Munsey, part of your testimony that you touched on just briefly involved the modification of electric vehicles and how hazardous that could be because it creates unapparent and unintended consequences and sometimes causing fires. But our home state of California has a rich tradition of allowing hobbyists to modify vehicles. So how do you balance those two ideas? Because they seem to be in tension.
I enjoy working on old cars and motorcycles myself, and if I look at the quote from Alfred Lord Tennyson on the wall about looking into the future, that is something we need to do when it comes to electric vehicles. The fact is, lithium-ion batteries that are poorly made and do not meet certification cause fires. My greatest fear is 20, 25 years down the line, as these cars are aging, we will have the home mechanics that are replacing batteries with poorly made, cheaper batteries that could. While I believe that people should be able to work on hobbies, we just need to make sure that we're giving them the ability to purchase the correct batteries, to install them correctly, to maintain their vehicles.
Thank you. Well, I see I am out of time. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Ms. Fushi, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Javarian, I'll direct my initial question to you. I think we've acknowledged that as EVs become more popular, that EV battery fires are going to become more common. As an expert in lithium-ion battery safety, what do you believe are the biggest research gaps in EV battery safety?
I think I've mentioned most of it in my statement. I think the fire suppression methods need to be optimized. Getting to designs to get to the cells in the battery pack, those need to be optimized. Stranded energy, understanding stranded energy is something that we need to work on. There should be remote ways to actually that can be software platforms that can be developed that can remotely understand what's going on in the battery, which areas are energized, and so on, and that will give a better idea for the firefighters and first responders to determine which modules need to be discharged, and that requires some science also. Back in the late 1900s, early 2000s. At NASA, I worked on a project where we were looking at doing an upgrade to the APU system. The APU at that time, or the APU for the shuttle, used hydrazine as a fuel. And we were looking to convert it to an electric APU. So we looked at a large battery. This was like more than 300-volt battery. And at that time, it was lithium ion. And the way we had designed it is we need to have two failure tolerance, which means even if two cells in the battery pack failed, we would need to still have power because it is a critical part of the shuttle. So we were designing bypass for cells that failed. And I think designs like that can easily be done. I mean, I don't say easy because these are, large voltage systems, have a lot of cells in them, but they are engineering and scientific methods to be able to do have those types of designs developed. And so then we can actually bypass, once we know which modules have energy in them, they can be bypassed, and the ones that are energized can still be discharged. I think it just requires a lot more work. I talked about cybersecurity. One of our sister institutions is a digital safety research institute, and they are worried about cybersecurity. And I think when you have the ease of updating your software in vehicles so easily, there is the possibility of people messing up with that also. So there needs to be security plans developed, making sure software follows standards, and standards are used to certify them, and so on. So there are several areas, again, looking at the different chemistries, trying to understand if we need new materials for firefighter suits, trying to understand if we need better respirators. There's a lot of science that, research that can be carried out. And I think, we are working on several of these, and we would certainly like to work on more of these. One of the goals for my institute is advanced safer energy storage through science. And so we really would like to be involved with, carrying out those and collaborating with so many agencies, academia, and so on, to get to a point where EVs are safer.
Thank you for that. So firefighters face great dangers on the job, and it is crucial that the protective gear and equipment available to them is capable of keeping them safe. I find it concerning that so little is known about the effectiveness of traditional protective gear when firefighters are exposed to battery smoke, which is very different from traditional car fires. Chief Munsey, can you describe your department's experience with using conventional protective gear to protect firefighters while responding to EV fires? You showed a little bit of that in that video that we saw from another area, but I'd like to hear from your experience.
So we've only had a couple EV fires in our county, despite responding to 196,000 calls per year and serving an almost 2.2 million population. Electric vehicle fires are not common today. I'm worried about the future. Our experience with personal protective equipment is we are concerned about our firefighters' safety. As I mentioned, cancer is at a higher rate in firefighters today. I've personally been to 5 cancer funerals for our members in the last 5 years. We're going to do everything we can to keep our members safe. What this means is that we issue second sets of full turnouts. These turnout gears between $5,000 to $10,000 per ensemble. We require that they laundry those between normal combustible fires. But when you're talking about electric vehicle fires and the gases, we need to take that full ensemble out of service and send it to a specialized cleaning service to be cleaned. At that point, about 4% of the personal protective equipment then fails that cleaning service, requiring us to purchase new gear for our firefighters. Some of the information that Dr. Javarian, did I say it right, gave is very concerning to me. HF is a very, hydrogen fluorine is a very concerning chemicals to firefighters. It's very dangerous. I don't know that there's been enough research here that the structure protective equipment is adequate for these types of fires, especially when it's pressurized gas in a container like the garage video that you saw.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. That's my time.
Okay.
I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. We'll hear next from California. Mr. Garcia, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to both the witnesses for this testimony. Very eye-opening as someone who drives an electric vehicle. I knew there were a lot of unknowns, but seeing that video, I certainly will be parking in the driveway from here on out. I want to thank you for putting a bright light on these issues. Fire dangers of EVs. Chief, thank you for your service. Doctor, thank you for everything you do for our great country. When you look at the potential energy, if you will, of an electric vehicle, lithium ion, any sort of lithium-based battery, it's substantial. But when you look at actual other projects that we're looking at throughout the nation relative to electric storage, it makes an electric vehicle look tiny. Next door to you in LA County, where I represent Southern California, North LA County, Acton, Agua Dulce area, they are installing something that is called a battery electric storage system, which is a huge facility full of lithium battery capacitors, capacity basically being kept there while other sources of electric energy are being pushed to that site. And so, Chief, you're the fire chief of San Bernardino County. I know you don't work in LA County, but we're neighbors, and sometimes our sparks turn into your flames and vice versa. So this is an issue that may actually reach out and touch you. But I want to play a quick game of good idea, bad idea. And these aren't trick questions, by the way. This isn't the oversight, the other oversight committee. But and I'll go first. Is it a good idea to have large battery facilities, large battery storage facilities for the purpose of making sure that the grid can handle some of the demands that we have? I would say that's a good idea. I think we need to have electric storage facilities. I think long-term, when we look at a holistic approach, we've got to have all types of energy coming to, especially Southern California. So I would say that is a good idea. Go ahead.
So you mean a battery storage facility that's properly engineered to prevent fire?
Yeah, that's what, and yeah, a lot of assumptions that go into that, and this is where the good idea, bad idea to you comes from. Would you consider it a good idea or a bad idea to put a facility like that next to either the I-15 in your case, or in my case, the 14 freeway, which is the major choke point, biggest freeway, one of the biggest freeways in Southern California. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? Literally, 200 yards off the freeway.
It's a local policy decision. If, as a fire chief, I would say that if that is a well-engineered, well-maintained, well-monitored system, then there's going to be a low risk and a low frequency. If there was an ignition, though, that is going to be an extremely hard fire to suppress in a short amount of time. And that
Understood.
could cause some economic damage to the city.
Yeah, and like you said, major commerce corridor for Southern California. Same kind of good idea, bad idea. If in between that freeway and this battery storage facility, there's actually a railroad, which is one of the corridors being looked at for high-speed rail as well. Would you put that in the good idea or bad idea bucket with the same caveats that you don't work there, you don't work in LA County. It's well engineered, but is it a good idea or a bad idea?
We get these questions, too, from our cities that are looking at putting these battery systems near infrastructure, critical infrastructure, near schools, near residential neighborhoods, near freeways. And as we look at population density and the density in our communities, it's going to be necessary to put these systems somewhere in the near future. Again, I'll go back to it must be well maintained, it must be well engineered, it must be well monitored. And if that's the case, you're going to have a low risk, low frequency. But if any of those are violated, you're going to have a higher risk and a higher frequency for ignition.
Potentially catastrophic results as a result of those things. For the sake of time, I'll condense the last few, but I want to just make a point to my colleagues. I'm not speaking to our two witnesses here, but in LA County, they have decided to put one of these BESS facilities, battery electronic storage system facilities, massive facilities, next to the 14 with a railroad going by it. Within a couple miles of a large water reservoir that feeds about hydrates about 250,000 folks. It already has existing large gauge transmission wires overhead, so that if something happens below them, they are going to be compromised. And it's surrounded by some of the largest wildlands in Acton and Agua Dulce in terms of the amount of BTUs in those wildlands right now. Probably the highest potential energy of fuel. And so, I guess my message is I appreciate what you guys have highlighted today, the risks, the concerns of an electric vehicle. And to my colleagues in LA County, this BESS facility being discussed in Acton is, in my opinion, setting us up for failure. And if anything goes wrong, we are going to recognize one of the biggest catastrophic losses of life and resources, and hopefully they can reconsider to the points that you made, Chief, everything that we've discussed around this. So with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. We'll hear next from the ranking member of the full committee, Congresswoman Lofgren. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks to our two witnesses. Chief, you've identified something important, which is the need for more research on protective gear and how it relates to EV fires. So, Doctor, are we actually on a path to get that research done? What further work needs to be addressed by this committee to make sure that the chief's identified need is met?
We actually haven't started any research in that specific area. Our area of research is now looking at different battery chemistries and what gases come out of it. HF is really difficult to detect. We know it is there, because if we heat up our pipes, the lines that go into an FTIR, we are able to see the noisy, recognition of HF, but we're not able to get a quantitative measurement. So we're really working on getting better estimates of that. But that would be one of the areas I think I would certainly look into talking to the materials people to see if they can do some work on getting new materials that would be tolerant to HF.
Mr. Chairman, this is an important hearing, and I'm hoping that after the hearing, we can have a discussion about what we need to do as a science committee to make sure that these identified needs are actually addressed. Because, Chief, we're so grateful to you and all the firefighters in the country for keeping us safe, but the more we can do to reduce your risks and the risks of your men and women, that's something, it's really a sacred obligation for us to do. The fact that we're not really addressing the need that you've identified, I guess, makes me wonder whether you think the firefighting community has clear lines of communication to researchers and manufacturers so that the needs you're identifying, and not just this one, are actually being researched. Do you think that exists now?
While I'm a strong supporter of the International Association of Fire Chiefs and other like associations, there are some fire service members that are not, and they are cutting off their own lines of communications. It's important that we're speaking with one voice, so we're doing that through our associations and the U.S. Fire Administrator, Dr. Lori Moore Morrell. These are important things for us to work closely with research and for us to understand how to keep our firefighters safe. But just as important, we need your help in this. We need to ensure that we are enacting legislation that the manufacturer of these electric vehicles prevent fires from happening.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we have access to funds to properly equip and train and buy the equipment, the tools and the equipment that are needed to suppress these fires without putting our communities in danger.
I totally agree with all of that, but we also have, a very large number of EVs out on the road today, and we need to make sure it's apparently a low risk, but it is a risk, and when it happens, we need to make sure that the men and women who respond are as safe as possible. And so that's why I want to hone in on the need to research further the protective gear. One of the questions I had, Doctor, is you mentioned cybersecurity. I don't know whether we need to be concerned about whether cyber attacks could actually instigate a failure or an ignition of a battery, or whether just failure of code itself could do that. Can you discuss that and whether we need to be taking steps in that area?
Sure. So one of the things that a battery has is a battery management system, and it also has an energy management system. And it's actually talking to the charger, it's talking to the loads and so on. And as you know, there are very easy ways to update software today. Mm-hmm. And given that the battery needs really very stringent safety controls, if something is messed up, and someone does it on purpose actually, then they could mess up the safety controls, and you could have a catastrophic failure with your battery. Because today, the way the manufacturers design the battery and how it's used is they do not use the entire voltage range of the battery. They use a very small range, because that not only ensures safety, but it also extends the life of the battery. But if you have that changed in some manner, you can easily have a catastrophic failure induced.
Thank you for that, and thank you for both of them. That's another issue, Mr. Chairman, I hope we can discuss further. I don't think most of the manufacturers have really addressed cybersecurity, and it's something we might ask NIST to identify and provide some standards. So, Chief and Doctor, you're serving your country well. Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. We'll hear next from my colleague from Georgia, Mr. McCormick. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll get right to the point because we have a lot to cover. Just last year, the Biden administration announced a mandate of having 50% of all new vehicle sales in the United States to be electric by 2030. According to the NFPA, approximately 130 million EVs are projected to be in operation worldwide by 2030. Not very far in the future. There are an estimated 283 million registered vehicles here in the United States. Now, if we're about to have half of that, it would be well over 100 million vehicles in the United States with the same hazards that we've been talking about today. Although the number of battery fires we've had in the United States is small, it won't be. That's a fact. Chief, as Fire Chief of San Bernardino County, do you believe your fire department is fully prepared to handle the challenges that come with rapid rise of EV ownership in your area of expertise?
No, nor do I believe that the fire service is ready as a whole.
Great. According to the National Volunteer Fire Council, there are approximately 29,452 fire departments in the country. That's a lot. With 24,208 fire departments that are either entirely or mostly made up of volunteer firefighters. Given that volunteer, do you think that there's any way to prepare these guys for the future challenges of fighting EV fires?
Yes, given time and sufficient funding.
time and sufficient funding. We have approximately about 5 years time, and the funding, which we know we have a problem with our funding on everything right now. Do you think that's a realistic timeline to be ready for that sort of influx of EV fires?
To add on to your statistics, there's 1.1 million firefighters. I gave you a price of $2,500 training per firefighter. I would estimate that that's about a 16-hour class. That's about a $3 billion problem just in training itself. I mentioned that we're going to get a heavy wrecker and a dip tank. Not every organization is going to be able to do that. That needs to be a regional asset. Those at about $2 million for that ensemble starts adding up. You mentioned there's close to 30,000 fire agencies, and you are correct. Each fire agency probably on average has 3 fire apparatus. And if you were to fully equip these fire apparatus, you're looking at, again, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars to do.
And then you add to that the development, dissemination, and training of new assets, which is to add another chemical to the repertoire. But I'll leave it to the scientists on my next question. Doctor, do you believe that we have adequate technology and training today that is easily accessible for all fire departments to use in this regard?
There are some things that have been put out because we're still in the research stage for some of.
Some things, but we're not adequately prepared across the board, correct?
Yes.
We'd all agree on that.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's legitimate that we could develop, disseminate, and afford these chemicals that we find? And by the way, I'm a Marine that we have just recently addressed in Camp Lejeune the chemicals that we use to fight other chemicals and fires that have leached into the water system that have caused cancer and other harm to people, that we haven't even studied those side effects. But yet in 5 years, we're supposed to have not only the means, but also the studies to support that we're not going to harm people more than the carbon emissions that we have right now. Do you think this is a realistic goal?
It depends on how much funding is.
Yeah, it depends on
science.
funding. So it comes back to, if we spend $1 trillion on this, we might be able to be somewhat safe. But let me kind of summarize this, because I think this is what this is all about. This whole movement, this green movement, is about saving people, I hope, by making sure we take care of the environment. So I want to point out that in this whole ridiculous idea that we're going to spend $1 trillion to eliminate 0.00017% at most of the atmospheric content. In other words, that carbon emissions that we produce by 100% of our carbon imprint of vehicles. And I'm telling you, I can do the math for you later, but it's infinitesimal. It is negligible if we eliminate all the cars in the United States. That's how much impact we'll have on the overall content of the atmosphere. We're going to spend $1 trillion. We're going to create chemicals. We're going to create fires. We're going to create hazards. If you don't care about the $17,000 per average car vehicle that the poor person has to afford, if you don't care that there's going to be exposure to people who are trying to fight fires, and that this is going to leach into the system, the very environment you're trying to save, chemicals that leach into the environment, chemicals that get into people's bodies trying to fight these fires. If we're talking about the environment, I really don't think we're having an honest conversation. I think that's where we need to start this. And in this idea that we're saving the atmosphere by creating chemicals and creating hazards to people that we're trying to save is ludicrous. And with that, I yield.
Gentleman yields back. That concludes our questions. I'd like to thank the witnesses for your very valuable testimony and your appearance here today before the committee. It's very clear, I think, two things have come out of this hearing. One, I very much agree with Ranking Member Lofgren that more research is necessary to make sure that that we're making informed decisions around dealing with this problem. And also very much agree with Chief Munsey that it's clear more resources and more training are going to be necessary to keep our firefighters and first responders safe. So we're going to continue having this discussion and hopefully be able to take steps towards solutions to this as more and more of the vehicles on our roads become EVs. The record will remain open for 10 days for additional comments and written questions from our members. With that, this hearing is adjourned.